Leorio doesn't change much, and that's the point. Out of Hunter x Hunter's main characters, the one who changes the least is Leorio. While some have said Togashi simply didn't know how to write him and hence largely omitted him from the story, I disagree. A lot. I see two main reasons why Leorio stays the same. Let's start with the simpler one to explain by going through some basic literary theory. In 4th grade literature class, you probably heard about two character types, dynamic and static. Dynamic characters change a lot over the course of a story, while static characters remain the same. Typically, you want your leads to be dynamic characters, as their sense of progression will give the audience a vicarious sense of emotional progression through the narrative. Typically, static characters are those with a one-off scene in the background, perhaps somebody relegated to a side role, or even an antagonist of some sort. The fact that Leorio is both a main character and static is not unheard of, but it is notably unusual. So why? Why do this? Well, I like to think an advantage we gain from this in a story like Hunter x Hunter is that he acts as a benchmark. The extent of the other leads' progress, both in terms of their character arcs and mastery of Nen, is more pronounced when they stand next to the unchanging Leorio. In other words, his lack of a character arc only strengthens the arcs of everyone around him. It's kinda like when Zabuza and Haku came back in the Great Ninja War to remind the audience of how far the characters have come. Except, this time it's a lot less stupid. In addition to reinforcing the sense of progression, Leorio's re-entry is an easy way for the series to return to business as usual. After enduring something as arduous as the Chimera Ant arc, it is understandable that one might forget what the series used to be like. But then here comes Leorio,
same as it ever was,
ready to remind the audience of older, more blissful times, and shift the tone back to something more lighthearted. Wow, it's just like the effect I talked about on Greed Island in my second best episode video. So in a larger, more abstract story sense, this is the advantage which stems from Leorio staying the same. However, in a more character sense, there is an even bigger reason why Leorio doesn't change. Simply put, he doesn't have to. Why? Well, this only makes sense when you start to think about the arc of the other characters over the series. Let's start with Gon. Gon begins Hunter x Hunter as a naive boy searching for his father. From the start, we are made privy to the fact that he is stubborn, imprudent, and impulsive, but also kind, optimistic, and caring. The fatal flaw which leads this character down a dark and violent path is that his naivety prevented him from ever seeing the world for what it truly was. Gon believed that he would get his license because he wanted to, that he would simply find his father because he had to, and that he and his friends could always be safe. He had the far-fetched, unassuming ideals of a child that could have never foresaw a horrible tragedy. So when P2 shows up and murders Kite before his eyes, Gon doesn't know how to handle it. His optimism fades, but his stubborn nature persists. He fully believes Kite is coming back right until the moment when P2 says it's impossible, trampling every ideal and preconception he held about the world. It was only natural then that this character would sink to such a dark place. He had to see the world for what it was eventually. No one makes it to adulthood without having lost at least one person. Unfortunately, this realization would also come in an extremely high-pressure situation, causing his character to change forever. This moment, where Gon sinks to a dark and despondent place, is the peak of his entire character arc. And it's an arc which wouldn't make any sense for Leorio to go through. During the first phase of the exam, we learn that Leorio's best friend died prior to the events of the series. This event was the catalyst that drove Leorio to become a hunter and doctor. In essence, we could say the defining moment of Leorio's life happens years ago off-screen, so by the time we meet the character, he has no realizations to make about the world. He already understands death and the cruelty of life, so even if someone close to him were to die now, it wouldn't change his perception of the world. If I were to distill this down to one main difference between the characters, it would be this. Unlike Gon, Leorio understands that life is not fair. While it's true Leorio wants to become a doctor to save others, let's not neglect his other stated motivation for wanting this job: the wealth which accompanies it. Leorio figures that if this disparity in wealth and power is going to persist, he might as well try to accumulate money to keep those close to him safe. Is that a fair system? Absolutely not. But since he knows he cannot change that fact, he's going to try and aim for the best spot on the ladder he can. Okay, but tragic loss is not unique to Leorio. There's another main character who also understands that reality is unjust. I am, of course, referring to Kurapika. Kurapika is the last survivor of the Kurta clan, set on a quest to seek vengeance and reclaim his clan's eyes. At the start, Kurapika was always very serious, but he seemed to show a little bit of joy at the sight of his friends and their company. York New City is where things really start to change. In the 6 months separated from his friends, Kurapika grows more resolute to the point of obsession. Melody describes his heartbeat as full of rage, and just from a visual standpoint, the man never cracks a smile again until we see him around Gon, Killua, and Leorio. But despite his shift in demeanor, Kurapika is unwavering. In Yorknew, he hunts the Phantom Troop all on his own, and ignores his friends until he believes the troop is dead. Once he learns they are actually alive, he begrudgingly includes them only upon their insistence. While that may seem hopeful, the later events in the story would paint a sourer picture. Sour? That's a word? That does not roll off the tongue one bit. In the election arc, Kurapika doesn't bother checking his phone as he stares at the eyes he's collected. He never learns of Gon's condition until well after the fact, and we get an incredibly revealing scene where Kurapika contemplates just how lonely he's become. He realizes that, once he gets all his clan's eyes, he has nowhere to go. He has no family, he's isolated himself from his friends, and he has no other ambition. Well, maybe he has one close friend. Now, Leorio may be a med student with little time on his hand, but I don't think it would be hard to make the case that Kurapika has him beat in the workaholic category. Furthermore, he keeps a healthy distance between his ego and his goals, never losing sight of himself or what truly matters. Sure, his desire to be a doctor means he has to spend time away from his friends, but when they need him, he'll drop everything to be there. Kurapika, unlike Gon, already sees the world for what it truly is. However, Leorio, unlike Kurapika, never emotionally invests himself in fully resolving a problem of the world. He knows he isn't going to single-handedly cure every sick person, and so he avoids being consumed by his work or berating himself for spending time away. While these two are both persistent and diligent workers, put as simply as possible, Kurapika puts his goals before himself, whereas Leorio does the opposite, ensuring he never loses himself in his dream. Which can't be said for our other protagonist, who didn't have a sense of self to begin with. Killua begins Hunter x Hunter as a boy who simply wants nothing. There are plenty of things he does not want to do, like inherit the family business, but ultimately, he has no goal to strive for. None except to maintain a friendship with Gon. Is that sweet? Yeah, but troublesome. Investing your entire sense of self-worth into another person is toxic, unfair, and short-sighted. Typically, this trait manifests in people who have no sense of care or worth for themselves, which pretty adequately describes Killua. The main arc of Killua over Hunter x Hunter is him slowly coming to find a purpose and sense of self. While a lot happens between Heaven's Arena and the Palace Invasion to bolster his self-worth, it's ultimately throttled into high gear when his relationship with Gon falls apart. When Killua's only investment is in Gon, and not even Gon is invested in Gon, with what does that leave Killua? Nothing. This realization fundamentally alters the relationship of Gon and Killua forever, and there's no telling where this character may have gone, if not for Alaka. Alaka comes into the story during the election arc. Killua initially takes her from his parents in order to heal Gon, but very quickly realizes he cannot take her back. This is where he discovers his first purpose in the series, not set or dictated by Gon: to protect and be a good brother to Alaka. It is only after he finds this purpose that he can be reunited with Gon, and the two of them can now meet with their own separate, independent goals. Finally, he has found what he wants. Now you could certainly say that even this is not a totally independent goal, and while that is true, I think it is an improvement upon the former. First, Killua sets this goal all on his own. Second, this goal is not all-encompassing. Killua can protect Alaka while traveling around with her in search of his own dreams. While this goal is dependent on someone else, For the first time, we can at least say Killua is in the driver's seat. Leorio always had self-worth. All the way back in the Hunter exam, Leorio was always shown to value himself. When he fears that not all of them will be able to pass the third trial, Leorio is ready to battle his friends if need be. He has the confidence and assurance to believe that if he were to become a doctor, he truly would make the world a better place. Where Killua would toss his own goals aside if they got in the way of finding Jing, Leorio would rightfully prioritize his own goals, even if quite literally at the expense of Jing. Because unlike Killua, Leorio has always known what he's wanted to do. From day one of the series, he's wanted to be a doctor. No more, no less. Thus, we see that he already had a deep personal ambition that drives him forward. He has no need to search for a purpose. From episode 1, he has had a pragmatic and realistic aspiration. With no good reason for him to forego his dreams of becoming a doctor, Leorio, unlike Killua, gets to keep his goals intact right up until the end of the series. To review then, Leorio, unlike Gon, never held ideals far-fetched enough to be trampled. He actively doesn't get consumed by his work to lose sight of his own needs or the things of importance to him, unlike Kurapika, and he's always had a strong sense of self-worth and conviction in his chosen career, unlike Killua. So, what more do you want? Like really, what would you want this character to go through? It seems to me that this character has already realized his arc prior to the start of Hunter x Hunter. Like Uncle Iroh, sorta. Did I really just compare Leorio to one of the most well-regarded masculine characters in all of human history as agreed upon by the internet, Uncle Iroh? Yeah, someone's coming for my throat in the comments. Now, all of this is not to say Leorio is without things to work on. He has his, vices?
自分のため勉強して叫んで部屋帰って釣り線こいて女連れ込んでネットしてる間中ずっと
But what it is saying is that Leorio, unlike the other three, lacks a fundamental flaw that puts him at odds with the world, his ambitions, or himself. Thus, he doesn't really need to change. With the current qualities he possesses, he could get through life happily and successfully without having to undergo a serious introspection or change in his character. I don't think it's an accident that Leorio visually changes the least between arcs. While Gon, Killua, and Kurapika are constantly changing outfits, Leorio is still wearing his same suit. Maybe with a different tie. And I think that's Togashi spelling it out for us, saying, hey, this Leorio guy, he has really got it all figured out. He's gonna just rock it the same way he's been rocking it. So here's to you, Leorio. Despite what the audience may say, never change. You're a dashing, admirable hunk, just the way you are.